They crashed a US missile into the Zone of Silence. The radio dies mid-sentence. A compass needle jitters, then swings as if chased. In the headset, a countdown voice cracks, fades, returns as a whisper. On a clear night above northern Mexico, a US Athena missile strays from its line and disappears into desert. They'll say the air ate the signal. They'll say clocks ran wrong and the sky dropped stones. They'll call it the Zone of Silence. To understand why a rocket crash rewired a landscape in the legend, we rewind to the test range, the control room, in a patch of ground that already made instruments nervous. The crash that named the desert. On paper, the 1970 Athena test was routine. White sands of the Gulf, an arc that engineers had drawn and flown before. The guidance stack rolled inside, gyros humming, accelerometers attentive, a radio link ready for mid-course corrections. On the console, the track started clean. A tiny light pulsed on the plot board, nominal. Then the wind aloft bit harder than forecast. Guidance compensated, but not perfectly. A small error is just that for a heartbeat. But an Athena doesn't stroll, it sprints. At speed, a degree means miles. Controllers watch numbers creep. A radar return lagged where it shouldn't. The telemetry stream hiccuped. It came back, carrying noise that didn't mean much. Heart rates rose. The room got quieter as people stopped narrating and started listening. Range safety didn't see an immediate reason to terminate. The window for a correction narrowed with every second of combustion. Out over the borderlands, the missile began to drift southeast to plan. The words sounded sterile, off nominal trajectory, but the visual, if you were on the ground, was anything but. Bright lands crossing a sky that usually keeps its own counsel. A tail like a cutting torch dragged across the stars. Telemetry vanished. The tone that meant we still have her went flat. The consoles kept their glow. People leaned closer, waiting for a packet, a checksum, a single valid line. Nothing arrived. A breath held across the room had nowhere to go. They marked it lost. Across the desert, a rancher saw the sky change color. The air trembled before sound reached him. He thought of storms. Then the flame bent and fell, and the night bloomed white. A second later came a pressure you felt in your ribs. He counted because that's what his father had done in thunderstorms. He lost count. The echo got in the way. Miles away, a prospector walking between low ridges heard stones ping as if rain had turned to iron. He dropped flat. The flare sank behind a dune and the horizon pulsed. In his mouth, dust tasted metallic. The trajectory projections, now hypothetical, drew a fan into Mexico's Chihuahuan Desert. Someone said the word recovery, and someone else said clearance. Lines to Mexico City opened. A joint operation formed in hours. The vehicle had carried no warhead. The politics would be sensitive anyway. A U.S. missile had just buried itself in another country's sand. You don't wait for daylight to start explaining that. You also don't sleep well until you know where it is. Convoys rolled south. Trucks that normally carried drilling rigs now carried men in hard hats and men in uniforms. Helicopters thudded low, chasing heat signatures that had already cooled. They flew by lights on the ground, ranch compounds, highway gas stations, and by the older beacons you can't see. Arroyos, pale flats, dark mesas. Locals met them with curiosity that wasn't friendly or hostile so much as practiced. In this desert, visitors arrive when someone needs water, or someone finds or something falls from the sky. The men asked for directions and got opinions. It went toward the salt, one said. Toward the hills, another said. Someone offered coffee. Someone sold fuel from barrels. Word spread faster than official notices could catch it. The impact site was not a neat crater. The Athena had broken low, shedding parts across a scatter that looked like a meteorite-strewn field. Fitting, people would later say, though the cause this time was human. The main body gouged a trough where the ground gave way. The sand smelled scorched. A tumble of alloy ribs, charred insulation, clean-angle fragments that didn't look like anything natural. Heat lingered in places you couldn't see. By afternoon, the perimeter went up. Tape first, then a ring of trucks, then men with radios who checked badges that most bystanders didn't possess. A mobile light tower arrived and turned night into a pale morning that robbed the stars of any authority. That's when the stories started congealing. Men in suits, some said. Instruments that made clicking noises no one recognized. A tent where they carried something heavy and didn't let it touch the ground. A few faces at the tape looked the way people look at storms, worried, thrilled, and ready to tell it later. What actually arrived were field geologists with magnetometers, flight safety officers copying serial numbers onto forms with carbon paper, and technicians trained to pick up parts without leaving fingerprints of sand. The magnetometers were standard kit for metal search. In a place like this, they also noticed more than debris. Needles twitched near the scrub. A reading would jump, settle, and jump again a few paces away. Someone laughed and said the ground had opinions. Meanwhile, a rumor outran the convoy that radios died in the area and compasses spun. Some of the radios did misbehave, mostly handhelds in low spots where line of sight meant nothing. Some compasses did jerk, especially the cheaper ones, near patches of rock with iron that would have been mined if the desert had roads good enough. In retelling, sometimes became always and jerk became spun. Curiosity beat caution. People leaned into the strangeness because it made the night make sense. Cleanup under floodlights has its own rhythm. Teams grit a field, bag parts, log coordinates, and move to the next square. Mexico's officials stayed close, asking the questions you ask when a foreign rocket makes your desert sound like thunder. The answers were terse and careful. No payload of concern. Guidance failure under investigation. All materials to be removed or buried safely. The last promise hung in the air. What does it mean to bury safely? How deep makes a story disappear? They dug pits for pieces that could be rendered harmless by depth and loaded trucks with what had to go back to the lab. Scorched sand clumped under boots and stuck to the soles like memory. The guarded perimeter tightened. Someone brought in a bulldozer. Its engine note filled the basin and made conversation an effort. The light tower hummed and drew a halo of moss that must have thought sunrise had moved. Outside the tape, a teenager from a nearby village kept a notebook. He wrote what people said. The next day, he had walked to a town with a newspaper and offered the story for a few pesos. Zona del Silencio, he wrote, because he heard an engineer joke that he couldn't get a station on his radio. The name fit like a coin in a slot. Everyone could feel what it promised. A place where the modern world's voice goes thin and where your own imagination gets loud. The phrase traveled. Reporters liked the contrast, silence that made headlines. They reached for older stories, times when watches stopped and when a man's donkey balked and refused to cross a dry wash because some animal sense told it the ground ahead behaved wrong. They braided those tales with the new images, U.S. trucks, floodlights, the smell of burned fuel. Secrecy did the rest. Not conspiracy, standard operating procedure. But pack enough procedures into one dry basin and it reads like a cover-up. No one stood on a roof and announced, "We lost track because the wind tilted us some small errors and then our signals hit the wrong geometry." They said as much privately. Publicly, the silence held. By the time the last bag was sealed, the last piece of alloy tucked under a tarp, the name had married the place. Zona del Silencio. A label that took an accident and retrofitted it onto a landscape that had been odd long before. You could feel the new gravity of it. Travelers started stopping on highways to stare into the empty and tell each other what happened here. Vendors sold sodas colder than the night and pointed toward the flats as if they were pointing to a secret. To see why the crash mattered, we need the land beneath it, the basin that gathers iron, the flats that drink salt, the rock that remembers where it cooled. Only then does a missile's lost voice make sense against a desert that was already muffling certain sounds. The desert that bends needles. Draw the map by emptiness first. North of the boson de Mapimí, where Chihuahua, Coahuila, and Durango nearly shake hands, the land sinks into a shallow bowl of dust. Ranges stand back like quiet spectators, low basalt caps, eroded volcanic necks, chalky limestones that crumble under a boot. In the center, pale flats flash in the sun, salt pans that remember vanished lakes. Arroyos cut fans across the floor and then disappear as if their water lost interest. Under that quiet surface lies a basement patched together over time. Ancient marine sediments packed with iron-rich sands, volcanic ash beds altered by heat and fluids, lenses of magnetite mixed into conglomerates like pepper in dough. In places, basaltic dikes thread through the older rock and carry iron minerals that took a magnetic set when they cooled. The desert didn't choose magnetism, it accrued it. People who work this ground treat the compass with respect and caution. A bearing you take at a ridge can drift by 10 degrees a few hundred meters later, then snap back as if the landscape sighed. The needle doesn't whirl like a horror story. It hesitates, tugs, and settles where local minerals tug harder than the planet does. Surveyors talk about declination and call it a day. Here, they add local attraction and keep walking. Field accounts stack up like small cairns. A ranch hand checks his route to a well and notices north isn't where it was yesterday. A geologist records a magnetic azimuth to a contact, moves 20 paces, and writes a different number with the same instrument. A road crew tries to keep a straight line across a playa, and later discovers their path curled subtly toward a darker streak of ground that, when dug, stains the shovel red, black. None of it proves a grand anomaly. It proves noisy ground. Radios complicate the picture because they tie the desert to distant voices. One day, a VHF handheld sings clear to a partner on a rise 2 kilometers away. The next, the same pair finds only static when they drop into a wash. UHF links bounce off a mesa and arrive strong in a place you didn't expect. HF skips change at dusk. The ionosphere lowers its mirror and suddenly a station in Sonora overpowers the one in town. People say the air eats the signal. The air mostly follows rules, but the ground participates. Look at the salt. The flats at Mapimí glint because halite and gypsum sit near the surface. Salts draw moisture even in a dry world, turning the skin of soil into a better conductor on some days than others. Radio waves that hug the surface bleed into that conductivity, losses stack. Move a few meters off the pale crust on the caliche and brush, and the radio that was dumb a minute ago wakes up. It feels like superstition until you check a soil map. Meanwhile, the basalt caps and iron-rich gravels don't just carry magnetism, they shape it. Induced magnetization, the rock acting like a weak bar magnet in Earth's field, adds a small local vector. Remnant magnetization, the magnetism frozen in when lava cooled or iron cement formed, adds another, sometimes stronger, sometimes skewed. Add them to Earth's main field and you get a patchwork of gentle pushes on a compass needle. Most of the time, you barely notice. When you're tired, lost, or your gear is cheap, you notice too much. Folklore grows fast in thin populations. A prospector complains that his needle spun, and the bar retelling becomes a whirligig in the next village. A tourist AM radio goes quiet for 3 minutes near a dune, then resumes with a burst of music. By the time it's on a blog, the zone becomes a dome where nothing electronic works. But measurement tells a narrower story. Geological surveys pick up low-amplitude magnetic anomalies the way a sensitive microphone picks up room tone. Distinct, yes. Planet breaking, no. A hydrologist working the basin jokes that the map looks like a spilled box of dark crayons, streaks where former channels carried ironstone pebbles and then stopped. On those streaks, handheld magnetometers chirp more. Flux gate sensors draw small wiggles and compasses bias toward the line. Step off it, and the signal relaxes. The desert lays down clues, not commandments. Then there's the angle of the sky. Mesas and low Sierras aren't high, but they're enough to mask line of sight for VHF and UHF. Walk behind a shoulder of rock and your partner's voice goes mushy. Climb 3 meters and it snaps clear. HF plays by different rules. At midday, the skip is lousy, and you feel alone even at 10 watts. At night, the band opens and you're suddenly in company with strangers hundreds of kilometers away, while the next arroyo over remains deaf. It doesn't help that time feels strange when you're heat stressed. Watch batteries die faster in temperature extremes. LCD displays wash out. A quartz oscillator that's supposed to hold a steady beat can drift when heated. A rancher swears his watch lost 5 minutes near the flats. Years later, a student repeats the walk with a fresh Casio and records nothing unusual. The brain keeps both stories, but the stranger one sticks. So why does the needle bend here more than in the next basin over? Because this bowl gathered what was available. Iron-rich sediments settle where the lake once stood. Later, volcanic episodes vented ash and basalt that cooled with a magnetic stance. Fluids moved through fractures and left magnetite and hematite behind in veins and lenses. Wind sorted grains by weight and shape. dragging lighter sand away and letting heavier, darker grains lag behind in swales. Over time, you get patches with enough magnetic personality to nudge. Notably, the anomalies are patchy. Walk a kilometer and you'll traverse quiet ground and lively ground, sometimes without a visual cue. That's why compasses misbehave in a way that's hard to map without dense measurement. Aviation charts won't mark it. The effect isn't strong enough at altitude to matter to modern instruments that average vectors and self-correct. On the ground, with a simple needle, you're living in the texture. Locals develop their own corrections. Use distant range lines, not the needle, for long bearings. Carry 2 compasses. Trust neither when they disagree, but trust the landscape you know, where a certain thorn tree leans, where a rock darkens after a dusting of rain. People say time slows here. What they mean is that you stop relying on gadgets and start watching shadows. Myth presses on measurement at the edges. Articles promise a triangle of silence as if the borders were surveyed. In reality, the zone is a cultural overlay on a geologic quilt. One day, a visiting crew drives in with drone gear and gets perfect telemetry. The next, a radio mic cuts out during an interview, and off camera, everybody smiles because the story just paid a dividend. The truth lives in the in-between, instruments that hiccup, directions that drift, and a desert that rewards attention. Strange ground is one thing, strange skies are another. People here talk about stones that seem to prefer this basin, iron hearts half buried after slow rains. They point to collections in town and the pitted faces of weights on a scale. To test whether the heavens actually favor this place, we have to look up, then down again at how deserts fake patterns and how rocks from space tell their own. Stones from space keep finding this place. Before the missile, the sky had already been busy here. Ranchers told of nights that bloomed green, then fizzled into cinders that left a smell like hot iron. Kids grew up knowing a word for heavy rocks that fooled magnets and shattered knives, irrelitos. In town, a shop window kept a tray of pitted dark fragments that looked like burned bread crust. People called them gifts. Scientists called them iron meteorites. There's a parallel down south at Campo del Cielo in Argentina, a strewn field famous for iron masses scattered across plains. The comparison isn't perfect, but it gave locals and visiting collectors a frame. An open landscape, sparse vegetation, heavy stones that survive weather, stories that last. The Mapimí Basin doesn't host a single legendary fall with a name stamped into textbooks, but it has something else, accumulations that feel like the desert has a magnet in its pocket. The first trick is preservation. Deserts cheat the calendar for iron. Where forests and rain quickly oxidize and bury, arid ground slows the rust and keeps shapes clean. Wind peels off lighter sand and leaves lag gravels, dense scraps that include iron fragments. Over decades, the lighter matrix lifts away grain by grain. The heavier pieces concentrate like coins at the bottom of a stirred jar. Walk a wash after a blow and you'll find in the elbow of a bend a cluster of black stones with a metallic glint under dust. Back them with a magnet and they click softly, one by one. Documented falls are rare events anywhere. Dense finds tell a different truth, where the ground lets you see what the sky already gave. A single fall can seed a field with fragments that are rolled out for generations, making a basin feel active long after the event. Add in unrelated small irons dropped over centuries, and the impression thickens. The zone's reputation grows because people can find, not necessarily because the heavens deliver here more often. Still, the rocks themselves change how instruments behave. Iron meteorites are magnetic, not just because they're iron, but because their structure, camosite and taenite intergrowths that take and hold magnetization. A detector meant for coins complains loudly over a fist-sized octahedrite. A handheld magnetometer logs a spike. A simple magnet on a string swings in a way that feels like a yes/no answer from the dirt. Hunters learn to read that language. The field becomes a slow conversation with beeps and pauses. Meteorite collections in northern Mexico are patchwork archives of this conversation. In Mapimí and Gomez Palacio, private drawers hold fist-sized irons with thumbprint regmaglyphs and smooth edges from windwork. Each piece has a provenance that's part memory, part map, found near the wash after the second fence, half a day west of the salt under a thorn, where the road bends around a low hill. Labels aren't Latin and catalog numbers, they're the geography of chores and grazing. Scientists step into this with method, densities, magnetic susceptibility, nickel content. An iron that snags a magnet feels eager, but susceptibility measurements quantify that feeling. It also explains a persistent human error. Not every dark, heavy piece is a meteorite. Magnetite concretions, slag left from historical smelting, hematite nodules, all of them can fool the eye. The zone geology increases false positives by offering plenty of magnetic rock that never saw the sky. Series collectors carry a streak plate in a file. A true iron meteorite won't make a red streak, and the interior reveals metallic sheen with nickel tests turning dimly positive. If you lay a grid across the basin and plot finds, you get clusters. Humans draw circles around clusters and talk about attraction, but zoom out and those clusters often match where people actually searched. Along tracks, near ranches, on accessible flats. We see pattern where effort went. This is searcher bias, not magic. It doesn't kill the romance, it gives it edges. When a new road cuts across a quiet patch, vines sprout along its shoulders. The sky didn't change. Our shoes did. There's also the physics of arrival. Earth's atmosphere tears most meteoroids apart. Iron masses resist that breakup better than stony ones, which means more irons reach the ground in solid pieces large enough to find and large enough to generate stories. Their fall geometry produces strewn fields, an elongated ellipse with larger masses near the end. If the wind on the fall night pushed debris, the ellipse stretches or bends. Over time, erosion moves fragments downslope into arroyos and out onto playas, retilting the field in slow motion. The modern distribution is both a record of a fall and a record of 1,000 rains. Get this. Hunters tell of a particular tone in their detectors, a broader, heavier sound than junk wire or spent cartridges. They call it the bell. One man followed that bell to a piece barely visible to caliche, a palm-sized iron he pried loose with a screwdriver, and a patience born of afternoons. Another followed it to a rusting bolt. The bell isn't mystical. It's the metal's response spread across frequencies, but it's personal enough to feel like luck. The magnet narrative tightens around these finds because the zone soil already tests magnets in subtle ways. Lay an iron meteorite on a patch of magnetically noisy gravel and your compass barely budges. Set it on a slab of quiet caliche and the needle quivers enough to notice. People stack these moments into a story. The land pulls the sky's iron in, the iron then pulls the needle. It's a neat loop. Too neat for strict science, but tidy enough to travel. Some claims stretch beyond what measurements can carry. Charts circulate with a tidy triangle drawn between towns, promising a hot spot of falls. The triangles in the air are inventions. The ground doesn't honor those lines. Better to talk in gradients, high likelihood where preservation is kinder, where eyes look, where tools beep, where iron stays near the surface. Out past the triangle, in equally dry basins, finds are sparser because fewer feet go there. The desert keeps secrets from those who don't ask. Meanwhile, museums tell a parallel truth. A labeled iron from Chihuahua in a university case might actually hail from a century-old trade, its origin vague beyond northern Mexico. Provenance gets blurry when pieces move through hands that prize weight and feel over coordinates. That blur feeds myths about constant bombardment. The more careful the catalog, the less dramatic the pattern looks. Still special, just not exclusive. Yet stand in that basin at dusk with a detector cooling in your hand and the sky going violet, and it's easy to see why the story persists. Planes of air thousands of kilometers wide carry dust that glows, and every so often, something more substantial arrives. The ground accepts it without ceremony. Sometimes a rancher's plow finds it. Sometimes a kid with a magnet does. Always, the weight in the palm shocks you a little. This came from beyond. Missiles, magnets, meteorites, tie them together and you get a myth that sells. Untie them, and what's left still invites. A landscape that preserves iron, a culture that notices, and a science that can name what fell. Radio's dying is the heart of the legend, though. If stones from space lure us down, it's the silence that makes us listen. Time to test the air. When radios go quiet, start with the basics. Radios don't all speak the same language. HF rides the sky. VHF and UHF ride straight lines.